Hello friends, welcome to the channel. Now today is not the usual detailed review that I carry out. Instead, it's a video that I've been waiting to release for the last few months. It's not really one that I had planned on making, and it's really more about my experience rather than an aesthetic or mechanical breakdown of a watch. Now, you may have watched some videos that I made. It was a whole series of videos on my first Rolex Z Blue Milgauss, which I basically shot, edited and put out immediately on the channel after purchasing it back in the summer of 2018. Now those videos are linked above, so do feel free to watch those. Now also friends, just remember the videos, they do take time, money to actually produce and edit, so please do subscribe, like and share. That would mean a lot to me. Now back to today's video. You might be asking what's happened. So now I can relay my somewhat sort of nightmarish experience with Rolex quality control, my interaction with the Rolex authorized dealer and with Rolex SA headquarters in Geneva. Now, the watch had a problem, and I noticed the problem after around 2 weeks of purchase in Asia, where I currently live and work. And the problem was that when the watch basically had zero power and you wound it, the seconds hand failed to start going, which is pretty alarming for a watch that I paid almost £7,000 sterling for, roughly $8,500. Now, a bit of background information. My routine basically when wearing an unwound or an out of rotation watch is basically when I wake up, grab it out of the watch box and I wind it around 10 to 20 times. I then set the time and basically push the crown back in, okay, and then I just leave it on the table. I go have a shower, I change, and I come back and I wear the watch and not really even think about it. And I've been doing that for all of my low, mid and high tier watches. Now, when I came back to the Rolex Milgauss, after following my sort of routine, I noticed that the watch was around 10 to 15 minutes slow, roughly the length of time that it had taken me to shower and change. But most alarmingly, the seconds hand was not moving. Only when I shook it hard a few times, the seconds hand started to move. But now the time would be wrong and obviously needed setting again. So what I attempted to do was basically just wait for the watch to power down and sort of investigate a bit further. I read the instruction manual, which pretty much showed me how I was winding and setting the time on the watch anyway. And after I did this again, lo and behold, when I wound the watch in position 1 for around 20 turns, then hack the movement in position 2 to set the time, then push the crown to position 0, which is basically the screw down position. Again, the seconds hand was basically dead. It was just static until I vigorously shook it. Obviously, and again, the time would be wrong if you came back to the watch later and were unaware of what had happened. Now, alarmed that this was happening to my new expensive and so-called luxury watch and wondering if the movement was damaged, I started the now seemingly torturous process of bringing this to the attention of the Rolex authorized dealer where I acquired the watch and Rolex headquarters in Geneva, Switzerland. Now here I must stress that I only wore the watch very minimally and basically around the house, and you can see from the footage that all of the factory stickers are still on the watch. Now, at the same time, I investigated even further by taking out my watches, which basically were across a very broad price range. I even took out a very damaged Mont Blanc watch. I took out an Omega, my Girard-Perregaux, some Grand Seikos, a much cheaper Seiko, and basically the seconds hand would all start on those watches after winding. But it would appear that the mighty king of luxury watches, the Rolex, was either different or damaged in some way. Now, the issue that I faced where I basically live is that there is a 15-day exchange and refund policy. But I literally noticed the issue after that period, which left me feeling a little bit worried and a little bit stressed. And basically, I emailed Rolex Geneva. I spoke to a gentleman there who was actually very polite and whose name I won't mention. And it was agreed over that phone call that I could send the watch to Switzerland for inspection. Now, I felt somewhat relieved at this stage that the watch was going back to Switzerland, where it was basically cased up. However, I was then asked, or rather I was emailed and then asked to send video of the actual issue, and some of the clips you can actually see in this video that I've produced here. Now, I wanted to send the watch off, but I felt that I needed to comply by meeting Rolex headquarters' request, and thought, well, at least, the Swiss watchmakers will be able to watch the footage and then get back to me. Now, after about a week or so, I received a bit of a nondescript email now asking me to take the watch to the authorized dealer. I inquired why I couldn't just send it directly to Geneva, and just felt that he was now sort of palming me off, and I felt over to the local authorized dealer. Also, when I quizzed them about the actual Swiss watchmakers and what they had made of the video that I sent them, I didn't really receive much of an explanation as to what the mechanical issue was, and I just got the impression that they did not want to really comment or really concede anything. Now, this sort of toing and froing by email and phone exchange to Geneva took several more weeks before I dropped the watch off some sort of 30 miles away to the authorized dealer. Now, they said they needed to keep the watch for another week to run an inspection, which I allowed them to do. But the tipping point for me was when I went back to the authorized dealer and asked them, why the watch was doing what it was doing when I had it. And basically they couldn't tell me why. But the thing that absolutely got me and really was the tipping point, they just merely confirmed that the watch's second hand was in fact static after winding the crown. But alarmingly, they said that they didn't want to actually open the watch up as it was such a new watch. And that for me was really worrying, and it felt as though that the service team was sort of telling me to basically live with the actual issue, which really didn't inspire any confidence in me in that particular product, a Rolex luxury product, their servicing, or really in their fault sort of rectifying methods. Now, for the next few months, I continued to bounce emails back and forth with Rolex Geneva in a bid to exchange the watch for a new one, but basically my requests just fell on deaf ears. They just weren't listening, and all the while I was basically in a state of limbo where I lived and where the exchange refund period had elapsed. Now, at this point, Rolex Geneva even stated that they would not even respond to my emails. Rather, I had to take it up with the local retailer. Now, this was a really frustrating situation with basically thousands of pounds at stake and a mechanically defective so-called luxury product. And this had now gone into months of wrangling and complaining. But finally, the local authorized dealer agreed to exchange my watch, which I refused, demanding a refund on the basis that, was it too much to ask that a £7,000 watch was perfect in the first place? Now, what this shows me is that Rolex holds all the power and not the customer. Basically, they did not want to concede anything. And to this day, I've had no explanation about the movement and why the second hand was stuck and why you had to basically shake the watch really vigorously to get it started. Now, this is not really about naming and shaming any particular authorized dealer, but I just wondered if, that watch was put back into a saleable condition and sold again. I do believe that is the practice, and perhaps I received someone else's watch with a defective or properly built movement. Now, I figured that, I was better off with cash in hand, and I decided that, I needed the time to sort of decide what I wanted to do with the cash, and if another watch came along, I'd have the cash to basically buy it, which I did, and it wasn't a Rolex. Now, the whole process itself was just very lengthy, 5 to 6 months, really protracted, left me feeling really frustrated, really quite annoyed and disappointed with Rolex. And, as an owner of a Milgauss for a few months, I hardly got to wear the watch. Now, both the Rolex authorized dealer and Rolex itself, they did nothing to retain my loyalty by, offering some kind of a small incentive or even apology as a result of the problems that I faced. They didn't even, or they haven't even to this day, say, you know, what the problem was with the actual seconds hand. I mean, that's how powerful Rolex is. But clearly there's a QC issue, and there are copious threads on watch and horology forums and YouTube videos about Rolex and its sister brand Tudor's QC issues. For example, the date disc issue with the Black Bay GMT, and this mechanical issue with my watch is just another example of recent QC issues that both companies have actually faced. But you know, they want to keep churning out these watches, but it would appear that they've sort of taken their eye off the ball, and especially when it comes to customer service. Now, thanks for watching, and do let me know if you faced any similar quality control issues or even customer service issues with Rolex and Tudor. And please help support the channel by subscribing, liking, sharing, so I can continue to put out more watch-related content for you.